Please pray with me. Good and gracious God, open our hearts and our minds to hear whatever message it is we need to hear this day. We give thanks, O God, that you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, those of you who grew up in church will remember this song. I apologize if you get that song stuck in your head. Man, do you remember that? If for those of you in Sunday school, we grew up with that one. So Zacchaeus is a boy's name that's derived from Hebrew, and in its origins, it actually means clean or innocent. However, the Zacchaeus that we meet in the Gospel of Luke is anything but innocent. Luke's story ruined a perfectly good name. Not too many people have named their little boy Zacchaeus after reading that story. We don't do it. There are some names, don't you feel like, that are ruined for us personally? Nobody names their child after the annoying kid that sat behind you in 4th grade because we're afraid our child's going to become that annoying person. And some names have been ruined historically by just one person. Take the name Judas or Benedict. Those names were ruined for the rest of history. So what do we know about this Zacchaeus? Who was this guy before his encounter with Jesus? Well, Zacchaeus was doing pretty well for himself. Chief tax collectors were known for colluding with Rome and then taking advantage of others and making a sizable profit for themselves. In modern day, think Rent-A-Center or paycheck loans, those sorts of programs on steroids. Now, Jericho was a really big city. Even Herod had a grand palace there. The city was a major location for money, for taxation. And no doubt, Zacchaeus had employees collecting on his behalf, basically shaking down small business owners. So his actions alone made him a social outcast. He was kind of seen as a pariah, feeding off those who he destroyed. Now, the story says that he was a short guy. He wasn't physically very threatening, even though he may have been intimidating because of all of his power. So you can imagine that the people mocked him behind his back all the time. So when Zacchaeus hears that Jesus is coming through Jericho, he's curious. He's curious to see who this man is that so many people have been talking about. They wonder, is he a prophet? Is he an out-of-control rabbi? Is Jesus making false claims? Is he trying to start a revolution? Or is there any chance, is there even the smallest chance that he might actually be the Messiah? So Zacchaeus runs ahead of the crowd. He's trying to get a good view, but as the crowd builds, he gets pushed behind because so many people in the crowd are taller than Zacchaeus that his vision is constantly being obstructed. Perhaps because he's ripped off so many other people, maybe the crowds have kind of shunned him. They've purposely blocked him from getting a close look at Jesus. So Zacchaeus runs ahead and he climbs the low branches of a sycamore tree. Now, in this moment, Zacchaeus is not focused on his appearance. He's not thinking about the fact that running and climbing a tree is a pretty undignified action for a powerful man in his position. He only wants to climb up the tree to be able to see Jesus. And the crowd moves along in a sort of human motorcade when suddenly Jesus stops and looks up at the tree and calls Zacchaeus to come down. It's interesting to note that even in his humanity, Jesus cannot totally contain his divinity, because he already knew Zacchaeus' name. He already knew his heart. He already knew his story. And yet he purposely calls him down from the tree to stand before him. Now the people are grumbling about why this nasty little man deserves to even be noticed, to be singled out of the crowd. Jesus was seeking out Zacchaeus. Jesus instructs him to come down from the tree, and then Jesus goes a step further and invites himself to be a guest at Zacchaeus' house. So not only was Jesus inviting himself to someone's house, which was pretty poor etiquette, Jesus is also making an in-your-face demonstration to the religious folks about who he's willing to associate. He's even willing to associate with a lowlife like Zacchaeus. So Zacchaeus hurries down the tree, and he's happy to welcome Jesus. He doesn't worry about if the house is clean or what else he had planned for the day. He's just happy to have the honor of welcoming Jesus. Hear this. Zacchaeus' encounter with Jesus was a life-changing event. A life-changing event. Zacchaeus promises to give half of his possessions away to the poor, to repay anybody he has defrauded, not just what he's defrauded them, but 4 times the amount of what he had charged them. And this act of repayment actually goes far beyond what Jewish law required in a fraud case. With this act, I think Zacchaeus is acknowledging that his behavior before was terrible. It was a shakedown. It was an act of extortion. And he makes this commitment to repay without being pressured or coerced. And he doesn't do it with a sullen face, but instead he does it with an attitude of joy. And then Jesus announces that Zacchaeus is indeed a child of Abraham, just like the religious people who were watching. So through this brief little interaction, we see what Jesus' role is. Jesus' role is to call people out of sinfulness, out of what has separated them from God, and to bring them back into right relationship with God. Jesus is truly Emmanuel, God with us. Jesus redefines, Jesus restores Zacchaeus to his original state as a son of Abraham, as part of the family. More precisely, Jesus defines who Zacchaeus has always been to God. And Zacchaeus changes his actions from sort of being like a wolf preying on sheep to serving as a protective shepherd who will begin to care for the poor, those he previously took advantage of. And because of his encounter with Jesus, Zacchaeus is able to go from kind of a distant observer of Jesus to being a faithful disciple of Christ. So what does this story of little Zacchaeus have to do with you or with me? First, I think we need to own and be aware of the fact that sometimes maybe we act like the crowd who blocked Zacchaeus' view, making it impossible for him to see Jesus. As Christians, we need to check ourselves and to make sure we're not so busy being angry or judging people that we block them from seeing Jesus. As followers of Christ, we are called to behave more like the sycamore tree. We are to enable people to get a better view of Jesus, to actually see Jesus through us, instead of blocking them from seeing and feeling God's love. I think another huge lesson from this story is that just like Zacchaeus, Jesus already knows our name. We baptized Chris today. God already knew Chris's name. Chris was not a mystery to God. You are not a mystery to God. God knows your story. You are not lost in the crowd. God sees you. God knows you. I used to have this nightmare. I dream that I'm part of this large crowd, and everyone in the crowd is there to see Jesus, and we're all raising our hand, trying to get noticed by Jesus, to get called on by him, and he actually points in my direction, and I point to myself meekly, and I say, "Is it me? Did you call me? Is it me that you want?" And he actually responds, "Well, not really. I was pointing to the person behind you, not you." Can you imagine the scene, the embarrassment, the disappointment? Rest assured, that is not going to happen. It is just the nightmare of a neurotic pastor. Jesus is seeking you. Jesus is seeking me. Just like he stopped and called out Zacchaeus by name, God knows each one of us by name. We have an identity in front of God. God knows our true selves, not the labels that have been put on us or the way we've been defined for others. Because we know we have a tendency to define people in a variety of categories, don't we? Like Zacchaeus, sometimes we're defined by our physical appearance. The bald one, the heavy one, the blonde one, the short one, the tall one. Or sometimes we're defined by our actions, either our actions in the past or our current actions. The shy one, the gossip, the wild child, the one with a temper, the funny one, the smart one. Sometimes our struggles define us. She has a learning disability. He has depression. She has cancer. His relationships never work out. Or sometimes we see ourselves through our life situations. The old man, the widow, the bachelor, the family from the wrong side of town. And we begin to take on the definitions that others have created. Even birth order has a way of defining us, and we have no control of that. We define the oldest child as either being bossy or super responsible. The middle child is seen as being kind of forgotten or totally independent. And the baby is maybe immature, but always very loving. And the only child is either seen as being self-centered or very mature. And people watch for these particular traits to affirm their stereotypes. And we often let ourselves be defined by those imposed limitations. And people will swear up and down that those are accurate descriptions, not even acknowledging the way that we're sometimes programmed to exhibit those behaviors. We are so ready to let ourselves be defined by others, but often we don't even give it much thought. We just kind of absorb those definitions. And if we actually want to reject those definitions, then we exhaust ourselves by trying over and over again to prove that they're wrong. Zacchaeus was defined by his short stature and his negative actions. And yet, for all of his issues, Zacchaeus is willing to take a risk. He's willing to climb a tree, to act in a humble way, to expose what he perceived as his vulnerability in order to see Jesus, in order to be in the presence of Jesus. I think sometimes we have to climb a tree, or the equivalent of climbing a tree, to separate ourselves from the naysayers, from the negative people, the people who would like to judge us, the people who would like to define us in the same old way. Sometimes we need to go out on a limb. Go out on a limb in order to make ourselves available to have an encounter with God. When Zacchaeus encounters Jesus, he was redefined. He was restored to who he has always been, to God. We also long to be recognized for who we truly are as a child of God. I don't know about you, but sometimes I need to be reminded that I am more than the way I define myself. I need to once again listen for Jesus to call my name and to reclaim my place as part of the family of God. So what about you? Are you ready to go out on a limb? Are you able to hear Jesus call your name? Are you ready to respond with a joyful heart? Hear those questions again. Are you ready to go out on a limb? Are you able to hear Jesus calling your name? And are you ready to respond with a joyful heart? And the most important question, are you ready to welcome Jesus into your life this day and every day? Are you ready to welcome Jesus into your life this day and every day? Let it be so. Amen.